Good afternoon, or I should say good morning. Uh, Today is August 29th, and there is so much more to talk about and never ends. And it just seems like actually it's the same old thing. Um, just the same old thing. Just recently, over the last week or so, the House of Representatives had 2 days of hearings with uh, the criminal that is leading uh, the Postal Service. And we have to go over the Postal Service again because it is really beyond belief. Uh, but we have a criminal in the White House telling the director of the Postal Service, who is a criminal and who perjured himself many times over in front of Congress during the last few days. I called up a number of the congressmen that are in that are from this state, from where I'm living, and from where I grew up back in Jersey and in New York, all Democrats. And because they're on the committee, and they were all very active during the questioning, and they went after him and all that stuff. But when it comes to actually doing something, nothing. They're not going to solve the problem. They know what the problem is. They identified it. A few of them, even Debbie Wasserman Schultz of all people, actually gets to the heart of it, and they are not willing to do anything. The Democratic House has the power at this moment, right now, this second, Saturday morning, the 29th. They can put DeJoy in prison right now. Put him in prison right this second for doing what he has done, for lying and perjuring himself in front of Congress. These are all crimes. For interrupting the mail and interfering with the United States Postal Service and the delivery of those mails. It is all crimes, what he is doing. He's doing it to, again, this is not a Democrat-Republican issue. This is an issue concerning one of the greatest institutions that this country has put together over 250 years. It is an attack which is turning into a political situation because it is one of the very few ways that the present criminal in the White House can keep his seat. And so he is doing really what even Adolf Hitler never did. I mean, Adolf Hitler didn't, hold up the postal service. He did burn down the Reichstag, and in a sense, that's exactly what Trump is doing. He's burning down, in almost a literal sense, the institutions of this country. And is there a comparison? You're damn right there is, because there are people dying because they're not getting their prescriptions on time. That is a fact, and that is on record. And I have called a number of congressional offices over the last few days, and I have been told by their staffs. I used to be a staff member in Congress. I was a staff member for a while, and I interned for a congressman in South Jersey. I was told by a number of different staff people from a bunch of different offices that they've gotten an enormous amount of phone calls concerning late pharmaceuticals, that people's health are at stake. And that is what's happening. What is really unbelievable during the hearing, when Debbie Wasserman Schultz finally nails the Joy, nails him to the wall, that he's straight out lying, and lying that he did not order those machines to be closed. And he finally admit he can't get out of his lie. And he was trying to say that somebody else is doing it. He's the one that's in charge of the agency. Nobody else is. The buck stops on his desk. That's where it stops. That's where the responsibility is. And he can't deflect it no matter what. Not a partisan issue. He is responsible, and nobody else is. And he's saying that somebody else was ordering the machines down. Sorry, he did it. It didn't start happening until he came on board, and the mails weren't being slowed until he came on board. And now he says right in front of the entire Congress and the people of America, no, I will not put those machines back. None of them. My sister-in-law is a postal worker down in South Carolina, a red state. I asked her straight out if any of the machines were taken down in South Carolina. Now, I don't know if she is informed enough. I don't know. But she said no, that they were not taken down. Well, isn't that interesting? Because in a red state, they're not taken down. So all the red votes can go in a red state. If what she's saying is correct. Actually, I don't think it is correct. I think every single state is affected. I will find out more about that during this next week. But as soon as I found out from her that that's her perception, that South Carolina has not been ordered to take down any of their machines, I called a congressman in the state where I live now and told his staff about that. They found that to be news, which I found interesting, and they were going to follow up with it. But the problem is, then I turned around and I said, why aren't you guys putting this guy in jail now? Why are you waiting? What's the wait? There is no waiting. You wait 2 more days or 3 more days. First of all, you're not going to do it. I know you're not going to do it. You're not going to. Congress is not a Democratic Congress. Should have been putting George Bush Sr. in prison, George Bush Jr. in prison. LBJ should have been put in prison for what he did in Vietnam. Congress, as far back in my lifetime, has not gone the final mile and used their powers to put away the executive branch, except for one time during Watergate, which Watergate does not match up to this at all. I mean, Watergate was a problem and a symptom, and it was leading up to where we are today. But this Watergate is nothing compared to where we are today. This is Watergate times a million times worse. Many, 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 many hundreds and millions of people's lives are at stake concerning the policies of where we're heading. Now, that was not quite the case for Watergate. Watergate was a whole different issue. It was a slow buildup to where we are now. So that's one issue. Again, the Postal Service, it's not the Postal Service. The issue, similar to Richard Nixon, is putting people in charge of entire departments of the United States government who are criminals, who are doing things not for the common good of the United States, of the people of the United States, but for the good of a very few corporate donors and the politicians who follow their orders. And Trump kind of falls both in and out of that. in that he follows his own orders. He follows their orders, and he follows his own orders. He's completely off the rail. He probably is the most deranged human being who's ever been in the White House. I mean, he's deranged, and he's also ill-equipped. He's uninformed. He's ignorant about an enormous amount of history. He is xenophobic. He's been a failure his whole life. I find, being, again, a born New Yorker, grew up in Jersey, this guy took the people of New York and New Jersey. They took him to bankruptcy 5 times. The people bailed this jerk out time after time after time. Atlantic City, New York City. He is a complete and utter failure and a joke when it comes to business. He's been bailed out by his father and his pal, um, who next time I'm going to mention the name. In charge of a very large corporation, one of the very largest. So that is the problem, is that we have a government now that is just full of criminals. This is one of the things that Alexander Hamilton and Madison fought very hard, tried very hard to keep power spread out, and so that no one faction could take control. But we have a faction now, and per Chris Hedges, the former writer for the New York Times, and who's on Jimmy Dore's show a lot, we have basically a corporate takeover. Now, I've been talking about that for a very long time. My first written piece, my first written editorial, which I still have a copy of, was in 1976. And I wrote about how the tax breaks in New Jersey was undoing the higher education services of the universities and colleges in New Jersey. I was writing about that in 1976 when the state of New Jersey was giving these huge tax breaks to Bell Telephone and AT&T and all the big corporations in New Jersey back in the mid 70s. Meanwhile, they were increasing the amount it costs to go to college in New Jersey. They increased it by 50% in 1 year. So I wrote about it back in 1976, how corporations were being let off the hook, and society was in turn being screwed by that. That the corporations were not paying their fair share to our society, and our society eventually would fall apart. Well, it took some time, but we're at the point now completely where the society is completely unfolding. It's completely fallen apart. We have a situation now where where we have basically the police are in fact the KKK, are in fact the mass murderers of thousands of African Americans, and putting millions of them into jail for no reason, for beating them, for killing them, for destroying their families and destroying their society. I first heard about something like that also back in the 70s when I was in college. I'd heard about it. First of all, we all thought that it was only in the South. Little did we know, it really wasn't only in the South. It was in every single town of this country and every city of this country. It is becoming more and more evident every day, especially with the gentleman who was just shot in the back 7 times and lived, which is incredible. The policeman who did that should be in prison for the rest of their lives. I personally don't believe in the death penalty. I'm sorry, death penalty. I don't believe in it. But I might really slowly change my mind about that. It is a coordinated cultural effort that the South lost the Civil War after 1 million people died, but they did not lose slavery. African Americans after the 1880s were basically not allowed to vote, could only live in ghettos, places out of the way, couldn't eat, couldn't stay in a hotel, couldn't be anywhere, couldn't even sit in a seat they wanted on a bus or go to the bathroom. White only signs during our lifetimes. The 50s and the 60s, those signs exist, and I will bet those signs exist in the Deep South today. That hatred has never gone away. It's stronger now than it was in the 60s and 50s and 30s and 20s and 1860s. It's worse now. It is worse. Every day is proving to be worse. And who are the carriers of this hatred? It is the police, believe it or not. It is the police that is going out and actually shooting people down. Just follow the videos. It could be a man with his entire family, could be a woman who's pregnant. It doesn't matter. The policemen have no empathy whatsoever, no humanity in them whatsoever, and it's an equation from a KKK and fascism and Nazism. It's the only equations that I could come up with. That this kind of hatred and this kind of ignorance and this kind of racism only exists in a few places like this. Incredibly, ironically, during the 80s, this country was very involved in making sure South Africa's government finally changed. South Africa's government was the worst and racist nation on earth at the time, possibly beating out the United States. The United States has far exceeded anything South Africa has done. But we're not defunding here. Our answer to South Africa was defunding their corporations, taking money out of their stock markets, their corporations, stop trading with them and trade with other countries and corporations that are from other countries. We defunded that government and it changed. We should be defunding, you damn right, we should be defunding the society and culture of police that exists today. Not get rid of policing, but to replace it with a police culture that is subservient to the citizens of this country, who they don't think that the police don't think that they can get away with illegal stuff on any in any state at any time against any person, basically of color, of some other nationality other than European. They do it to some white people, but it is an incredible high percentage that it is African American, where the African Americans in this country can't even go outside without having their guard up. They can't go shopping without having an enormous amount of energy, having their guard up. No, I mean it's an equation of Nazism. That's what it is. And to call it anything else, then look in the mirror. If you're calling it something else, or if you're not accepting it, then look in the mirror. You're the problem. You're the problem. And you're part of it. And you're probably proud of it. You're probably proud you're a racist. You're probably proud of it. Because you can't get it's we've tried to get rid of that culture in this country. We had a civil war over it. Hundreds of thousands of guys died over it. And entire parts of this country were burnt to the ground. And we still can't. Not only did we not get rid of it, this racism thing, but it is worse today. Worse today. It's one of the great things about the internet is that you can actually the technology has finally come over the last 10, 15 years where you can see people can on their iPhones take pictures anywhere, anytime. So no longer can police hide, which they've been hiding from the 1880s until today. Now, over the last 10, 15 years, there is a record of people getting this, what's been going on for the last 150 years. So over the last 10 years, I've seen, I don't even know how, maybe 1,000 videos now of police stopping people for no reason, or walking up to them for no reason. They're walking home. They're walking in a neighborhood, walking home, and they stop them. They escalate on purpose so they can put the cuffs on them for, again, a lot of times no reason. It's against the law, and police from the beginning to the end acting against the law. That they in their culture they are justified in their warped minds that they can be the judge, the jury, the executioner. It's all okay. It's all right. That's what, if you haven't seen the movie Serpico, the actual guy, is still alive in New York City around 19 the late 60s. There was this detective, a policeman, young guy from New York, became a policeman and a detective, and he would not go on the take. He would not take money. All the guys that worked with him were insanely upset with him because they knew if he didn't take money, one day he would rat them out. So they set him up, and somebody put a bullet right in his face, and he survived. And incredibly, he's still alive today. If you haven't seen it, Pacino is the one who plays Serpico's part. Great movie. Might have been Pacino's first really big movie, actually. Anyway, so that's that issue. It just never goes away. Racism in this country never goes away. Not only against African Americans, that's the big issue of the day today. Jewish people in this country, kidding. They were redlined, not allowed to live in certain neighborhoods, couldn't get jobs. If somebody found out you were Jewish, you'd be fired on the spot. The Irish, when the Irish came to this country, the Catholic Irish, this country was mostly Protestant. And when the Irish Catholics came and the Irish Italians came, the WASPs treated them like crap. Again, they wouldn't let them have certain jobs, forced them to live in certain areas. There'd be gigantic battles between, there's some very famous battles in New York City between the Irish and the Protestant gangs. And it's, the American Indian, the Chinese, who were gunned down, whole villages gunned down in the West during the 1800s. Japanese internment, 1940s. I growing up, I used to listen to this about the Japanese internment camps. At first, like you can't believe that something like that would happen in this country. The only reason why the Japanese were put in internment camps is because it's just so easy to point them out and put them in internment camps. They're obviously they look slightly different than Europeans. We were at war with Germany. Germany did more damage than the Japanese did. Why didn't we put all the German Americans in? I don't understand that. Why didn't we put German Americans in internment camps? Well, you know why. Because one, they're white. They're part of the infrastructure of this country. They're probably actually second in how many of that certain nationalities in this country. There are more Germans in this country of German ancestry or Germanic ancestry than anything else other than maybe British and Irish and Scottish put together. It might be that German ancestry is number one, and so why weren't the Germans put in internment camps? Well, they're part of the power structure here, and it's impossible. I mean, how are you gonna if you're looking at 100 people, you can't tell what part. You can't tell exactly. You could generalize and say, some of the darker complexions are from the Mediterranean. Well, that's why, because it's easy to pick out the difference. That's why African Americans are have a history of being of Europeans being racist against African Americans. They are they look different. They're easy to find, and so let's just permanently attack them, which America has done. You don't see people going after any other particular group like that. Well, the Spanish are catching up. The American government, the American people, American government, this particular administration, I've never seen racism just overtly against Central Americans and Spanish speaking peoples, Puerto Ricans who happen to be born American citizens and who fight in the United States Army. The unbelievable ignorance of a huge portion of the population. My brother and I used to think it may be capped out at 40%. I think it's near 70%. The more I hear, the more I see every day. I'm learning every day. Even though I'm above 60 years old, my pride isn't that deep. I like to learn. And my views will evolve. I am not set in my ways. And I am learning every day that the racism in this country and the ignorance in this country goes way above 50%, way above. I don't know where it stops. It is part of being American almost. That's how deep it is in this country. There's no other country like it. Not Russia, not South Africa. There's no other country like it. Only in America. And it's sad, it's tragic, but African Americans are being basically pushed out of the voting booth by the tens of thousands in key states, Florida and Georgia. Florida and Georgia, this time around, should be a solid wave of blue. And there's a question only because tens of thousands of people in both Florida and Georgia and North Carolina are being pushed out of the voting booths based on race and no other reason. If you're a Republican, that's what you're for. That's what you're for. If you're a Republican, you're for African Americans not voting. Who else are you not for voting? Now, 70% of all Jews vote. I'm Jewish. 70% of Jews vote Democratic. Maybe Jews shouldn't vote. Who else shouldn't vote? Tell me else who shouldn't vote. Maybe we should only go back to white Protestants who are English speaking or have English blood in them, no Irish, and only the English who speak the Queen's English should be voting and who own land. So that maybe, maybe 10 million people vote instead of 250 million. If you're a Republican and to a growing extent, a Democrat, that's what you're for. You're for a system that is just utterly and totally corrupt, that is backward, ignorant, and sick. The Electoral College, as I've mentioned before, is based on racism. It has the blood of clinking chains on it. Go back 300, 400 years. So that's the end of that issue. I've talked too long on that.